He survived the infamous disaster by getting drunk throughout the sinking of the RMS Titanic. While it isn't known what he drank that night, 33-year-old chief baker Charles Joughin is considered by some as a hero and has been a fan favorite within the Historic Travels and the History Inside a Nutshell Discord communities. In today's video, we will look into the life and career of everyone's favorite Titanic baker. Charles Joughin was born on the 3rd of August 1878 in Cheshire, England. Following his father's death in 1886, Charles went to the sea at age 11, following in the footsteps of his older brothers. However, before he was enlisted in the Royal British Navy, Charles had training in baking and pastry. Where he trained is a mystery. Between 1900 and 1901, he was working as an extra second baker aboard the White Star liner, the RMS Majestic. After that, he would work on board the RMS Titanic, and by 1911, Charles was working on the RMS Olympic, though his position was unknown. Charles joined the Titanic as chief baker during her sea trials in Belfast on the 2nd of April 1912. Joining him were two wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, Captain Edward J. Smith, J. Bruce Ismay, and Second Officer Charles Lightoller. At that time frame, he would be a first officer. Charles would then spend the rest of the Titanic's voyage down below on the saloon deck. Charles would work alongside a team of 14 men with 2 confectioners who were responsible for preparing pies and sweets and 12 bakers who prepared the bread, including second baker John Davis and Vanna baker George William Feldham, who would have been responsible for making rolls and pastries. The bakers would have worked in 2 rooms, and these 2 rooms were the baker's shop, where the bread and sweets would be made, and the bakehouse, where the bread and sweets were put in the oven before being served to passengers and crew. There is also a bake shop for third-class passengers down on F deck. Although working hours on the ship's kitchens are well known, records of the working hours for the bakers have been lost to history. However, there is one little clue where one record suggests that an extra third baker, Charles Burgess, along with third baker William Hind and 2 bakers shared a shift at 9 p.m. From a historian's point of view, this could mean that the bakery staff would have worked 15-hour shifts from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. and possibly split into different time slots. As for Joughin, he would have gotten up before 8 a.m. every morning, and once he was beginning the day, he would see the boat list for the kitchen staff that would be posted on the galley. However, is it possible to determine if Joughin shared shifts with the same or various with the second, third, extra, or assistant bakers? On the night of 14th of April, Charles was down on E deck, sleeping in his cabin when he was awakened by the violent impact. Immediately, he arose from his bunk and began making preparations to provision the lifeboats with bread. Charles and the staff from the bake shop brought bread up to the boat deck. Not long after, he was seen return to E deck, where he noticed third-class women coming along Scotland Road whilst carrying their belongings, and an entrepreneur steward attempting to navigate non-English speaking passengers their way to the boats at the aft end. 15 minutes later, he returned to the boat where he was assigned to Lifeboat 10. In the British inquiry into the disaster, Charles described the scene when a large crowd of passengers gathered around Chief Officer Henry Wilde, who ordered them to stay back from the lifeboat. They were getting the boat ready for getting the passengers in, and Mr. Wilde shouted out for the stewards to keep the people back, to keep the men back, but there was no necessity for it. The men kept back themselves. We even made a line and passed the ladies and children through. While assisting some stewards and seamen to get women and children into the lifeboat, Charles and Wilde saw that the boat was half full. However, some women ran away, believing that they'd be safer on board the ship. Charles then descended to A deck to look for more women and children. After the descent, Charles, some stewards, and sailors continued forcibly taking women and children up on deck where Lifeboat 10 was waiting to be launched. However, because of the sharp list to port, some women and children were thrown into the boat. However, one woman lost her footing and she slipped between the lifeboat and the Titanic, hung upside down. By a miracle, she was caught by a steward named William Burke and was hauled aboard into A deck. Despite him being ordered to take charge of Lifeboat 10, Wilde instead gave orders to Burke and 2 other seamen to take command of the boat. Charles was left on board the ship. Remaining on deck, Charles made various trips to his cabin where he consumed bottles of liquor. When he visited one final time, he began to notice a small amount of water engulfing E deck. Then Charles headed for B deck, where he began to throw deck chairs overboard and descended to A deck before leaving the Titanic. I went to the deck pantry, and while I was in there, I thought I'd take a drink of water. And while I was getting a drink of water, I heard of a crash as if something had buckled, as if part of the ship had buckled. Then I heard a rush overhead. When I got up on top, I could see them clambering down from those decks. Of course, I was at the tail end of the rush. You could have heard it, but you did not know what it was. It was not an explosion or anything like that. It was as if the iron was parting. Charles realized that the ship was in the early stages of breaking in half, presumably down a small staircase that ran flush with the ship's third funnel and perhaps over the side from above. Charles headed for the stern before making his way to the poop deck. When he reached the deck, Charles held onto the railing as the stern made its final plunge. Charles later said in the British Inquiry that he was the only person who was hanging onto the railings. I was wondering what next to do. I had tightened my belt and I had transferred some things out of this pocket into my stern pocket. I was just wondering what next to do when she went. I do not believe my head went under the water at all. It may have been wetted, but no more. After believed to be in the water until daylight started to break and being in the water for over 2 hours, Charles swam toward the collapsible lifeboat B. Just as it was thought breaking daylight, I saw what I thought was some wreckage, and I started swimming towards it slowly. When I got near enough, I found it was a collapsible not properly upturned but on its side, with an officer and I should say about 20 or 25 men standing on top of it. He tried to get on but was pushed away. In the end, he hung around the collapsible boat, but only for the time being. He was recognized by the cook, Isaac Maynard, who attempted to help Joughin get on the boat. When this failed, Maynard held Charles' hand for a brief period. Charles was pulled into Lifeboat 10, the same lifeboat he was supposed to command. Charles then continued to work as a baker for the White Star Line and up until World War I, where he spent time working on board the Olympic. He served the Marine Fleet and survived a fire on board the SS Congress in 1916. He emigrated to America in the early 1920s, where he continued to work as a baker on board American ships. During World War II, he survived another disaster when a U.S. freighter, the SS Oregon, was accidentally rammed by another ship before it sank. He died on the 9th of December 1956, and strangely enough, on his death certificate, someone put down his occupation as baker on Titanic. Oh, Charles.
Oh, Charles, indeed. That's definitely a wonderful conclusion for the video. So first of all, I want to give a massive big thank you to DK for narrating the video. DK loves Charles Joughin so much. No, Giles Joughin, I beg your pardon. Giles Joughin, he loves Giles Joughin so much, and he's put his heart and soul into this narration, as you can hear and tell. So DK, thank you so much for narrating. And speaking of, Charles is featured in 2 documentaries. One that is already up on the channel, which is the Collapsible Lifeboat B, which I will leave a link in the card above, but also he will be featured in a small role on an upcoming documentary called Le Restaurant Titanic, and it's a 6-part series I've been working on for, oh god, how long? For about 6 months now. I'm still nowhere near finishing it, but it is going to take me a while to upload the videos, but please bear with me because they will be coming out during the late summer and the early autumn. I will be keeping everybody informed on each episode, but I cannot wait to show you guys. I'm absolutely excited about this series, and I think it's one of my favorites that I've done so far. And until then, I will leave you guys there. And if you like the video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more future videos. And until then, I will see you very soon. Take care.